Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our video unboxing and first impressions look at the Xiaomi Redmi Go. This is the cheapest smartphone that Xiaomi has ever released, and it sells for under 70 bucks unlocked. It's also the first Go edition Android phone from Xiaomi, which is a lighter version of Android. It doesn't take as much RAM and memory to install. This one, which includes just 1 gig of RAM and 8 gigs of built-in storage, but still delivers a fairly smooth performance thanks to optimized versions of apps like YouTube, Files, Gmail that take less memory as well as require less bandwidth for internet connectivity to still run really well. So if you just need a very basic budget phone, it might be an excellent option to consider. It's just a fraction of the price of flagships these days, which can run for $1,000, which is just crazy. Aside from being the first Android Go edition phone, this is also the second phone released under the brand Redmi directly. The first being the Redmi Note 7. The story is Xiaomi decided to spin off the Redmi brand to focus more on value-oriented phones, whereas the Xiaomi brand would focus more on upper and premium devices, similar to Huawei and Honor, Oppo and OnePlus. So instead of calling this the Xiaomi Redmi Go, technically it's just called the Redmi Go. You're actually getting decent specs. There's a 5-inch HD display, there's a quad-core processor, it's actually the Snapdragon 425, which is better than many other Android Go phones like the Nokia One, which uses a MediaTek chipset. It's also one of the cheapest Android One phones on the market, period. And it has an 8-megapixel rear camera and a 5-megapixel front selfie cam, along with a 3000 mAh capacity battery, and supports a micro SD card to expand on the built-in memory. So here's the box. It looks pretty typical as far as other Redmi phones and Xiaomi phones we've seen in the past. This global version does have dual SIM support, so you can put 2 SIM card numbers in at once, and it does support 4G LTE in addition to Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, GPS, all the typical stuff we've come to expect. Right, so sliding open the box, one point I want to make is even though 5 inches may seem kind of small, and it does have a very traditional 16:9 aspect ratio for the display as opposed to the taller 2:1s, it was really not that long ago, in fact under 2 years, where 5 inches of a device like this was still very much standard. In fact, the last 5-inch phone that we reviewed from Xiaomi was the Redmi 4X, and this was released at the second half of 2017. So again, here in early 2019, it's been less than 2 years. It's crazy to think that something like this would now be considered entry level compared to the taller devices that we now have that have 6-inch displays and above. So a device like this now seems very compact and portable, but it really hasn't been that long. So in a way, I think that Xiaomi bringing back a form factor like this, but selling it at a really low price is actually a pretty smart thing to do. We have a SIM card ejector tool along with a documentation guide. It says Redmi Go User Guide, along with a micro USB cable for charging. Of course, it's forgivable on a super budget phone like this that it's still using micro USB and not Type-C, but we also do still have a standard headphone jack as a result. And here is a USB charger. Now, first impressions of the phone itself is it's actually pretty lightweight, but it does feel extremely solid just because everything is made out of a unibody polycarbonate construction. So even though it doesn't have any aluminum or metal on it, like on some of the more expensive Redmi phones or Xiaomi's own devices, it still feels very durable and well constructed. Now, one feature that we are missing on the Redmi Go is a fingerprint scanner. So there's no biometrics. You have to use a pin or a pattern on the display. On the rear here, we have the 8-megapixel lens with an LED flash. The side here features the familiar volume rocker and a power key, which are all pretty tactile and responsive. On the bottom here, we have access to the micro USB port. There's a loudspeaker and a microphone. There's the Xiaomi logo printed on board. And on the other side, we have a SIM card as well as a micro SD card slot, which are in separate compartments. That's actually kind of interesting. And on the very top, there's that standard 3.5mm headphone jack. Let's peel back this screen protector here and turn the unit on and see if there's any power. Now we do have capacitive on-screen keys, as you can kind of tell, which will take us home, back, and multitasking. So these aren't on screen, but they're placed on the bottom bezel, which is actually pretty good because, again, the phone does have slightly larger bezels. Since it is using that older aspect ratio, at least it's being used. Very quick boot up sequence, and we can just tap on start. Truth be told, it's actually a very good display for the price, and even though it's not going to be quite as pin sharp, if you look really closely with your eyes, it is plenty sharp as well as usable, especially on a slightly smaller 5-inch display here. Just very sensitive, and again, viewing angles seem to be actually really good for the price point here. Just a few years ago, a device that you could get for under $100 would definitely not have an IPS panel, and viewing angles would be horrible, but we've progressed by leaps and bounds in terms of quality since then, especially if we go and push up the brightness here. You can see that the screen quality just seems a lot better. And that said Mint Launcher, which is interesting. So it looks like there's actually a very light skin on top of the Android Go edition that Xiaomi has put on here. So it's not completely stock Android. But anyways, like other Go edition phones, we can swipe up for the gesture of taking a look at all of our applications installed. And that includes Facebook Lite. There is Android Go edition, the Assistant Lite. We also have a standard version of Chrome, it looks like, Lite edition of Gmail, Maps Go. So again, these will take up less space. There's less fancy animations and transitions, so it allows it to run a little faster on a slower device in terms of memory and processor. But again, all the interactions and swipe motions, as you can see here, are just very snappy and responsive. Keys down below here do have haptic feedback, so whenever you tap on it, the phone vibrates, and it makes it feel like you're pressing on a real button. However, they're not backlit, so it can be a little bit more challenging to see in the dark. Here's the calculator app, so again, the other tools here are exactly the same as regular Android, and we also have the ability to search for apps on this little bar at the bottom. This pulls up the keyboard, which you can see has a dark theme applied for these Android Go edition devices. However, it's still very sensitive and responsive to type on as a whole. It also offers swipe. You can also do a voice search, search using Google Assistant, so all of these standard features are on board here, and again, very responsive to use. We have the YouTube Go Edition app on the very bottom here, a sound recorder, here settings, and also what's called a Mint browser. I guess that's part of the launcher or skin that they've installed on here. Anyways, if we go over to about the phone, we can see that indeed it's running on Android 8.1, so not on the latest Android 9.0 Pie, but perhaps we'll see an update since it really is a pretty stock feeling device. But anyways, on the main screen here, we do have a folder that's dedicated for your Google apps. Again, all of these Go Edition services, which are lighter on space, and you can choose actually to play back the video in basic, standard, or high quality, and it tells you exactly how many megabytes of data it is. So again, if you do have a prepaid data plan, or if you're traveling and roaming, it's actually a great way to optimize your data usage. And it still is actually very responsive and quick to load back the video, as you can see here. 8X here in 2019, dual-core Qualcomm processor. Although some of the international versions of the HTC 8. Let's pause that there, and the drag down notification shade just looks exactly the same as regular Android. We have access to all of these standard things like a battery saver. Xiaomi does have a cleaner app installed, which allows us to empty our cache as well as kind of storage of files that we aren't using. So it will clear that off from the background, and again, since the built-in memory, only 8 gigabytes, a part of that is taken up by the Lite Android Go operating system, so we're not left with too much storage if you're taking a lot of images or apps, so it's nice that they include this, or you can use a micro SD card. Otherwise, there is a Google search bar on the top here that you can see also gives you some notifications of what's popular around you in terms of current news and whatnot. Otherwise, we can also long hold on the home key here to bring up the Google Assistant, just like on any other Android smartphone. I can tap on the multitasking key here, and that's what multitasking looks like on Android Go. Again, not quite as fancy in terms of animations, but it actually is still very functional. Camera, and we're just going to end our first impressions and do more testing and come out with the reviews soon. But the camera app, as you can see here, has also been customized from Xiaomi. It looks very familiar to any other Xiaomi phone we've seen in the past. You can actually enable HDR mode as well on the top, as you can see there. You can apply filters, different scenes, and at 8 megapixels, of course, it's not super sharp, nor does it have, the bokeh effect that we have from dual lens setups, but overall it's still a pretty smooth experience if you want to snap a quick image or two. It is capable of recording video up to full HD resolution. So let's take a quick image of this box here, and you can see it's actually pretty fast to snap an image, especially when there's plenty of light around you, and performance doesn't seem shabby at all over here. So again, overall, I would say that the experience as far as smoothness, very good considering the limited hardware that they have on board. As always, with Android Go Edition phones, it's better than expected. I'll just end on a quick size comparison of this phone and the aforementioned Xiaomi Redmi 4X. Here, you can see that they have exactly the same dimensions. The 4X is a little heavier because it has a aluminum back, but the top and the bottom are made out of plastic. It's also a much more expensive phone, about twice the price when it was released, again, less than 2 years ago. It does still have slightly better specs on paper, but the performance is honestly about the same now in terms of day-to-day navigation. And here it is next to something like a Google Pixel Original from 2016, also with a 5-inch screen. So you can see here that the form factor really isn't that outdated if you think about it. It just feels a lot more outdated now because of all the notchless and bezel-less phones we've been spoiled by. But it hasn't really been that long ago since a 5-inch phone like this was really considered the norm. So again, a very affordable and budget-priced device, but seems to be a great potential if you are looking for something that's really cheap. We'll be doing more testing and come out with a more complete review soon. But thanks for watching this unboxing and first impressions video here at OS Reviews. This has been the Xiaomi Redmi Go.